Welcome to True House Stories. It's a new dawn, a new era, a new time. And with that comes some new talent. I went through the tea leaves. You know, when you take the tea leaves one by one and you look at them and you say, who are some of the people we want to bring this year coming in? And then when this guy came to me, it was like, yes. Yes. Let me tell you who I have this week. He is of African descent. He lives in Canada. He now resides in the West Coast. He moved from the East to the West. He's in Vancouver. I learned that he cycles. And when I mean cycles, not motorcycle, he bicycles for charity events. He is also a sensation on YouTube with his streams. The more I speak to him, the more educated I have become. And I have to say, this brother, he plays very well. And let me tell you another thing. I said yesterday, I got this guy coming on, and these women sent me messages. Oh, we love him. We follow him. We can't believe you got him. I said, yes, I got him. So, True House Stories would like to welcome to the stage, out of Canada, Vancouver, JaBig. Yes.
Hey.
There's my audience. Da, 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 da. Hey, JaBig, I know it's early. It's in the West Coast. It's 11:05 in the morning for you, right?
It's actually, it's 11. But technically, I'm jet lagged, so it's probably, I'm still on London time.
Where have you flown in from?
From London.
Oh, wonderful. You out there playing?
Yes, I want to play there for December. And then, spend New Year's Eve there. And then, of course, since you mentioned it, I had my bicycle there. So I was biking, spinning and spinning.
Wow. Wonderful. So you're the life of the international DJ that cycles every continent. I don't know why I'm getting these Instagram things coming through. I'm so sorry. I apologize about that. People has now all of a sudden decided, since we're live on Instagram as well, they could be sending messages. So I apologize for that. Well, let's get right into it. Thank you again for, spending your time. I know you're jet lagged. I hope you're relaxed and comfortable, because I know you have some things and basically some education to share with us about you and your life and how you came up through this music industry stuff. And, we all see you on YouTube doing your live streams, or actually just listen to you, maybe not necessarily see the live video part of it. But before we even get into the YouTube thing and how that all came about, we're going to go real simple. Let's take it back in time. How does music find you as a young boy? What is your influences?
So surprisingly, I come from a very, strict background. My dad is a church minister, so we're not allowed to listen to music, but the irony is that they introduced me to a friend of, the family friends, and they had a son, and he was an American missionary, and listened to a whole lot of American music. And so that's how I got into it. But at the same time, it was also in the mid 90s. And that's when, house, like the David, CNC Music Factory, David Morales, where everything was popular. And I like that bit. I like the fact that it was very, it made me happy. So then I started researching it and I started playing it. Of course, I was playing at, secondary school parties, and I'll play a little bit of cheese in there, the Celine Dion's and the whole. But then as I grew up, I liked the house music part of it, and then I guess here we are today. I just grew up progressively with it.
How much of your life did you spend in Africa, and how much of your life did you spend in North America? When did you make it over?
Okay,
and why? And why? There's three parts to that question. And why?
All right. So I'm not good at maths, so I'm going to speak in edges, and people can just do their own. They can do their own calculation. So I grew up I was born in Rwanda, which is a small country in Central Africa. But when I was 8, I was born in 1979, and when I was 8, we moved to Kenya. My parents just decided that they wanted to take our family somewhere else, and moved to Kenya. and I lived there until, if you know your history, you know what happened in Rwanda. And then we had briefly gone back, and then we left again, and we returned to Kenya. And then in the late 90s, we moved to South Africa, where we spent 5 years. And then my parents decided again for the last time to move the family to Canada in 2002. And I've been here ever since. Yeah, and okay, so how old was I? I have no idea. But, you can just run the numbers, Somebody who moved to Canada in 2002 and who was born in 1979, how old was he? Well, that's how old I was. But I know that I spent the majority of my life in Canada. Actually, no, I spent the most years. The country I spent the most years in is in Canada.
Well, it's actually almost half and half, because you're about 23 in 2002, if I have it correct.
Yes.
So yeah, but most of your life was more Canadian based than it was African.
Yeah, I spent most of my life. Most of my time I spent it. The place I spent the most of my life is in Montreal. In Canada.
Yes, because we hear that French accent, bonsoir, and sweet. Oui, I could hear it, and Montreal had a big club scene as well, because I played many times in Montreal as well as an international guest. So you have been around it at the right spots. Like Africa was also, it was beginning early, the house music, because now Africa is off the chain.
Yeah.
With house music now.
In Montreal, so it was pretty brutal, because all the DJs that played house, they were, they used to cross the border quite often, and the local scene was very strong. And basically, you couldn't just be okay; you had to be very good, because, you just have to be. And I have to credit the fact that I had some DJs that took me under the wing, Jojo Flores, and I also used to buy my records from Inbeat Records by Christian Pronovo. And somehow I gained favor with them, and then they would get me records, and two, get me bookings, and that's how I got started. Because that's what I needed. That's what a DJ needs to get started. Is I guess opportunity and music. And I was starting out. I didn't have like a lot of money, because I was still in my early 20s. But the record store owner used to take some for me and then put them aside, because I knew that even though I came to fetch them later, I would pay for them. And he would tell me, get this, get that, get this, because, he was also a veteran in the scene. And so, yeah, the fact that I actually landed in Montreal, I think is 100% the reason why my YouTube channel ended up blowing up, because I landed in a place where perfection was the rule, the standard. You couldn't be just okay or not okay. You just have to be good. Otherwise, you didn't exist.
So let me understand this. You started, as we would understand this, in the vinyl era, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I remember carrying, and the vinyl era in Montreal is different than the vinyl era somewhere else, because in Montreal, in winter, when you're spinning, you cannot put your record case on the ground when you're walking. So you're walking for 40 minutes without having to put your record case down. And because you don't want the records to, you don't want the salt to damage your record, because I don't know why I had the metallic ones. So you had like a backpack, 2 record boxes, and you walked. So you got to a gig, you're spinning, people are like, what's going on with that guy? And, it's just because your arms, but now with the, with this USB era, we've lost this.
Let's talk the technical end of the vinyl era. The actual beginnings for you, the beginnings of beat matching and everything, did that all come from self-taught, or were there others giving you the inside tips of like, for example, here, don't mix vocals over vocals, I was told. Make sure you mix with the phrasing and this and that. And then you had to go home and sit there for hours just putting records to mix and hope. Because the first initial records I remember mixing sound like 2 trucks crashing in the night. There's no sync button like Pioneer created. What was it like for you in the beginning?
So I started like actually, when I said I started the vinyl, I actually started in, I guess, like I said, in secondary school, which means that it was house parties. So the house music was on vinyl, but the actual pop stuff was on CD and cassettes. So actually, when we started, I didn't. And this is a funny story. I didn't even know what a DJ was for like the first 5 years of my. I was like perhaps 14, and all the way until I was like 19. I didn't even know what a DJ was. So we used to have actually started with two stereos. People would take two hi-fi, and then would blend in. Press cassette, and then. So what I used to do at home, I used to take all the songs that went together, and I used to sit and make sure that they matched, and then I would go and do it live. It's only later on that I discovered the turntable that I realized that there was actually a button that could change the speed, the tempo. And then from there, I started messing around, but I couldn't figure out how to get it started. And the only DJ lesson I ever got, or the only point I ever got, was there's a lady she showed me, because I couldn't figure out. So like, your tracks always started the wrong way. You have to cue it. I'm like, what is that cue? Well, you take the first beat and then you rock it. And then from there you count. I'm like, that's how you get it started. Because before, what I used to do was to press start, and then it will never catch on, because it's the techniques. It takes a while before it catches, it goes up to speed. So then when she showed me the cue, I was like, oh my goodness, that blew my mind. And then from there, we just let it go. But the whole thing about like vocals not clashing, it was just my ear. My ear didn't like that. I was like, it doesn't match. Things are conflicting. So then I went with the flow. And by the time I moved to Montreal, then you had like, the DJs, nobody ever said anything, but you know how DJs are. They just look. When they do something a little bit funky, they just look at you. Nobody says anything, because also Canada being Canada, people are polite, But you can, you learn to read the room, and then you realize, oh, something is wrong. And also, the beauty of Montreal is that I would go out often. I would hear, some of the good DJs playing, and I'm like, oh, this is how they're doing things, and this and that. So in a way, I got inspired. But when it comes to sound, it was more what I liked. You know what I mean? It's what I liked, and from there, I guess I just kept doing what I did. And when the YouTube thing happened, my channel blew up pretty quickly, because I was one of the first ones to do it, and before copyrights were an issue on YouTube. So my biggest secret is not because I am any good. It's just because I was first, before there were copyright issues. And by the time I was playing whatever, because my mixes were actually recording from some of the gigs I had, or some of the practice sessions I had at home. And then I realized, oh, I don't have to actually stick to a certain sound, because people tend to like what is it that I have to play for them. So that's how I ended up, getting this sound of mine and getting it acknowledged and appreciated, the world over.
I want to ask you about your father. You said your father was a minister?
Yeah, church minister, like a pastor, reverend.
Gotcha. That's what I thought. And in the church, there's music, of course, as we all know.
Yes.
So is there any musical background in your family as far as you, instrument-wise? Anyone played music as far as instruments or singers? Were you around any of this to you becoming this DJ?
I think the only instrument I can play is the recorder that I played at school. I don't even think I can barely whistle. I don't even know if I can whistle properly. But so I don't come from a musical background, but although we love to sing. And as adults, though, we've all gotten into music. I'm the only one who's into music full time, but all my siblings, they sing, they play the instruments just out of their own, I guess for their own fulfillment. But I guess because also the kind of church we went to, it was very Methodist, very like strict. So it's more hymns, that's why even to today, when I see people getting excited at church, I'm always like, why are you getting excited? Calm down, calm down. I was going to say calm the hell down, but anyway.
Calm the hell.
Yeah. So the singing I grew up in church was more like the traditional hymns, where you just sit like this all day, and then you say amen, and then you keep going. You know what I mean? So, but of course, I'm African, and I was surrounded by music, because the I think one of the best things that my parents ever did for me was to send me to an international school. So I was surrounded by people from the world over. And actually, that's how I know music from all over the world, because I used to hang out with Senegalese, Ethiopians, people from like Brazil, from everywhere. And when I would go to their house, they would play the music. So that was my key. I wasn't allowed to listen to music at home, but I was allowed to go visit my friends, and I was listening to my music at theirs, And that's how I get to know a lot of music from different backgrounds, and it sort of like influenced my style too, which is pretty crazy because sometimes I'll travel to somewhere and they'll play music and I'm like, oh my goodness, I remember this from this, this friend's house, and yeah. So to answer the question, I don't come from a musical background, but I guess also when you're African, well, music is part of the DNA. So really, it's whether you're active with it or not, it's in your DNA.
So being of Methodist background,
yeah,
it's very strict, religious, strict type of way of living. And what was the plan that your father had for you? Because I know music was not in that plan, and not to be this DJ JaBig. Like, I know that was not part of the plan at all. I can just visualize just when you said, see there, and went, amen. Oh God, this is a very strict household.
Yeah.
Share that with us. Share it.
So for starters, I had the double combo of being, obviously, first of all, I'm African, and then I'm Christian, and then I was a foreigner because I always lived abroad. Most of my life I spent it abroad. So I had different types of pressures that not a lot of people can relate with. For instance, when you're African, to begin with, forget whether you're religious or not. This whole music business, it's only white people that do that. Like, my son is not becoming a musician. You're not doing that. That's crazy. That's like, what are people gonna say? I didn't send it to the best schools to go become. My dad used to call it troubadour, which is like somebody who goes from village to village, banging drums for pennies. You know what I mean? And then of course, being Christian, like, you're not going to all those places where there is like, like pretty much like Sodom and Gomorrah, like, all the, like, it's complete hell and this and that. You're not doing that. So, but I knew I want to become a DJ. I knew I want to become a DJ. So when I was at university in South Africa, because I was at university and I was doing a bachelor's of commerce in marketing, and I was sitting in a statistics class. Oh my goodness. Like, I haven't felt the kind of person I am. I don't really fail at things because I'm a little bit of, I tend to be like a perfectionist. But if there's one thing I can just take my hats off to and say, you beat me, fair and square, is statistics. Because I realized that I'm the kind of student I used to open the book for the first time before the exam and actually get my 60%, I used to wing it that way. But when it came to statistics, I realized there's a lot of background, there's preliminary work you need to do. You have to understand the basics before you go to the actual exam. So statistics, oh my goodness, statistics kicked my butt big time. And one time I was in a stats class and I was sitting and I'm like, what am I doing here? And I couldn't answer that for the 20 minutes. I couldn't answer it. So I got out of class and I got up and I dropped out of university. And so I lived in South Africa, and my parents lived in Johannesburg, and I lived in Pretoria. That's where my university was. I'll never forget, that's the only time my parents ever came to any school thing of mine. They dressed up, they came dressed like all like suit and all like formal. And they sat in my room like, what are you doing with your life? Like, what are you doing? You can't drop out of university. I'm like, listen, I can't do it. I just want to go become a DJ. And they were like, okay, this guy is crazy. They said, okay, you want to become a DJ?
Wait. Let me ask the question as your father would ask you. What are you planning to do with this? Because that was asked of me just like that.
Yeah. No, it's not even what are you planning to do with this. It's
what are you thinking? What are you thinking, right?
I don't know what kind of parents you have, but our parents don't reason with us. It's more like, you're doing what?
What are you doing?
Yeah. And then they're like, I remember like my parents looked at they looked at each other as in, like, is this him?
He's crazy.
He's crazy. And then they figured, okay, you know what? You want to be smart and become a DJ? Go become a DJ. But from now on, you're going to be on your own. You have to do everything. Go become a DJ, then you'll see what happens. Well, I'm still a DJ. But eventually, but it was more that it was misunderstanding. It wasn't because there were, I mean, I love my parents, and even today we talk about it, I tease them about them, I tease them about it. I tell them, remember this and that. But the thing is that my parents, for them, it was more about, this artist life. They were more concerned about my financial stability, which, to be honest, is, when you're African, and the world is a little bit unstable, financial stability is number one. You know what I mean? I mean, health is number one, but financial stability is number two. So for them, they were, in their legitimacy, I was just throwing my life away because I was going into a life with no, because they were like, at least if you're, if you're an accountant or this and that, even if you don't like it, you have like recurring income and good income. Because also, I come from a family where this whole business, pursuit of happiness, that's for pursuit of what? Being happy, and being happy is having a house, having being married and having a bunch of children running around. That's true happiness, and that's true being an adult. So I became a DJ, but then I moved back home because, even though they were tough, they couldn't just let me be on the street. And I don't know if it's because they love me or it's because it's African pride, because they can't have the son being a DJ, but also on the street. So I moved back home. But then they noticed something. They noticed that I was getting some gigs, but they noticed that I was actually pretty disciplined about it. They would hear me making phone calls about the bookings. They would hear me, being all like business with it. And also the one thing they knew, because I would tell them when I would go to work and when I would come back. And I never forget, sometimes my mom used to come into my room and smell the air to smell if there was alcohol or anything, because that's what they thought. They thought I was just going to a life of the bush, like to go just be wild. But they realized that, I was just in there for the music, because I've never drunk my life. I've never smoked. I've never taken any drugs. I know that I have any judgment against anyone. It's just, I've never done it. And I'm not saying I'm better or worse, I mean, I have my vice. I eat a lot of chocolate, which is sugar, which is the worst drug, but it's just, my parents realized, oh, this guy is actually a professional in what he does. And also in the meantime, I'd gotten a day job because I was very good with the internet. And I got doing like a search engine optimization, email marketing. That was like in the late 90s, when people didn't even know what is, what like even optimization is. I was doing that. And my parents couldn't believe that I would go out and club and then come back. And then on Monday, I'd wake up super early to go to work, And then they said, okay, it's pretty fair.
Well, you had dedication and the drive to succeed.
Yeah, because they saw that I was making some serious money, but I was actually coming home and then relaxing and listening to music, to the extent that even at some stage they were like, do you have a life? Like, do you have friends? Is there like, and then they realized, okay, this guy is okay. But for me, my saving grace was when the bishop, which is like my dad's boss, who, he happened to be in town and my parents invited him. And then obviously I was the only one at home because all my siblings had gone to university, or, they were at university. And then he asked me like, what is there to do with your life? And I saw my parents like, oh my goodness. And then it's like, oh, I'm a DJ. It's like, oh, what is that to do? Well, I go play music in nightclubs. And my parents were like, because, you don't do that, you don't, that's pretty shameful. You don't do that.
Because it's worldly music. It's the world thing. And that's,
oh my gosh, like this reverend here, what has he done? Then the bishop said, but then the bishop said, oh, you know what? Actually, church needs people like you. And, the world needs people like you, so that you can go be the light in the darkness. Because, because he said that in church, it's people who have the light, who bring the light to each other. But then the best are people who go out there and be an example, and who just show that they can be part of the world without being part of the world. And I was like, okay, I'll take that. And then we carried on with dinner and this and that. And then that day, suddenly, my parents' perspective changed. It's almost as the bishop validated what I do. And then my parents were at peace with it, because, which got to show that ultimately, it's also the image thing that my parents, the issue. about the son being a DJ and being this and that because it's not. But after that, everything was okay. And I was actually, now it became like where I'll never forget because sometimes I would be taking a nap and then my parents would tell my siblings who were visiting, shh, Jean is taking a nap. He's working tonight. And then they would leave me. This time they would they would leave me when I would come back from the clubs. There'd be like leftover food and this and that. And they started, and they encouraged me. I'm 42, and every now and then they'll still say, "Hey, don't you want to go back to university and finish your degree?" But no, I love my life the way it is. And I'll never forget the one day when I was dropping out. My father said, "You know what? You'll see one day something big is gonna happen, and you will realize that you should have gotten something more stable because financially it's gonna be a big financial hit." And I promise you, I think that man predicted 2020 because I'm talking all this. It's a conversation we had in the late 90s. It's talking about something big that's just going to paralyze the whole world, and I would feel sorry for not having financial stability. Well, the pandemic hit, and it's true. What happened? It's like the nightclubs, nobody could DJ and this and that. But then suddenly I was like, hang on a minute. Everyone I'm surrounded with, all these people who have 9-to-5 jobs, it seems like everyone seems to be struggling more than I am because they have mortgages, they have car payments, they have all this and that. And I seem to be doing okay. And that's when personally I stopped being afraid of the life I chose. And I said, okay, I'm happy with it. I think I went on a tangent there.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Anyway.
We need to understand you. And this is perfect. I'm glad. But the thing is, I love the idea that the bishop gave the green light to your lifestyle. That's changes everything in your home with your parents. Now, all of a sudden, it's one of their peers or somebody they look up to is now paying homage to you.
The boss.
The boss is actually saying, you're good at what you do. This is great. Yeah. We need light like you in this darkness. Comes light, and you're perfect for that. And you know what? Music is a healer.
I believe so.
But what I was thinking about was you mentioned statistics in college and stuff. And you also mentioned in the late 90s you were working with programming pre to the internet becoming what it is now. So let me say this to you. Did you actually have the insight pre to YouTube that you were going to take this music thing into the computer? Because a lot of us at that time were saying, get out of here with that internet stuff. We were thinking more like, we're doing the live gigs. This is the way it goes. Was that already something you were actually dreaming about? I mean, were you foreseeing this way if you were looking into a crystal ball, or was it just something that you happened to gravitate to the computer and work that way and just went with the changes?
Well, there's no exciting answer. The answer is that I actually didn't see the relationship. The YouTube thing happened by accident. And the whole irony is actually, it's my mom that gave me the idea without knowing. Because one day I was paying them a visit. So anyway, you'll hear that I talk about my parents a lot. It's just, I like them and I like to go see them. So yeah, anyway, I don't live with them.
No, it's wonderful.
So I was paying my parents a visit. And then I was upstairs talking to my dad. But then downstairs I could hear a lot of Rwandan music, music from Rwanda. And I kept wondering, who's listening to that? And then I went downstairs, it was my mom. And I'm like, where are you getting this music from? Because it doesn't make sense. I don't see the tapes. And there's a lot of it. You've been at it for like 2 hours. It's like, no, I'm listening to music through YouTube. Now I was like, Mom, you know what YouTube is? It's like, what do you mean? And she showed me that she has playlists. And it's actually the first time I saw that somebody was making playlists of her favorite song and letting it run through like a continuous, radio station. Because at the time there were no ads, there was no nothing. It was, YouTube was still a small. It was before Google purchased them, so there were still they were just some tiny company. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And then at the time I had a website, and I used to have some mixes that I streamed there, and I had random strangers come to it and this and that, and then it got popular.
Please search for part 2 of this podcast on the platform you're watching or listening to. And please do not forget to follow us.